You're listening to episode number 6 of the Estranged Heart podcast, and I'm your host, Kreed Revere. Welcome back to our returning listeners. Thanks so much for tuning back in. And if this is your first time here, welcome. Thank you for checking us out. Please be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss when a new episode drops, and those drop every Sunday at 3 p.m. Pacific time. For now, I invite you to settle in with a cup of coffee or tea. Remember to open your heart and, relax, sit back, and have a listen. Couple of disclaimers as we always go through at the beginning of each episode. I am not a therapist or counselor. Nothing within this podcast should be considered or taken as therapy. If you are in need of therapeutic support, such as counseling, please seek out a therapist near you. And I'm adding this one for this week as a reminder that the things discussed here are my story and my experiences and not that of my adult children. Their stories are just that, theirs. And I will not disclose any information or knowledge I have about their stories without their express consent. So let's begin with a couple of quotes. The first one. Our children are watching us live, and what we are shouts louder than anything we can say. Wilfred Peterson. And the second one is, remember, our healing and growth may feel more like a breakdown at first. Kreed Revere. The last few episodes have covered my estrangement and reconciliation story. Many of the upcoming episodes will cover what I've learned from that experience, as well as what I've learned by being a facilitator for estranged mother support groups and as a member in several online support groups for estranged parents as well. And unless I have permission to reveal names and identifying information, all identities will remain anonymous. Today's episode will cover one of the biggest ahas that came to me through my healing and growth process post-estrangement. It came to me through therapy and shortly after reconciliation. And this big aha was a major reason why I started an online support group that is current and active at this time, and actively working with estranged moms, as well as beginning this podcast. Let me also say this before we get too far down the rabbit hole today, and that is, there are a couple caveats to what I'm going to be talking about today and in the next couple of episodes. And that is, not all estrangements are created equal. As many different individuals make up families, there are different estrangement experiences, just as many. And so no one, just because my estrangement experience is what it was, does not mean it's going to be like yours or your friend that you know that is estranged from her children, so on and so forth. Also, addictions and divorce complicate estrangement. So those things, when they happen within families, with individuals, it adds extra layers to the estrangement experience. And sometimes those layers take years and decades to be able to be peeled back and actively worked through. And again, as a parent, you can't control your children if they have addiction issues, or if you're divorced, you can't control your ex-spouse. And so there are lots of other layers that come with that. So I just wanted to put that out there. And also, the third thing is that not all estrangements will end up in reconciliation. I know that. And I don't want anyone here who listens to this podcast to think that I have some sort of rose-colored glasses on because my estrangement didn't last for decades and because it ended up in reconciliation and things like that. I hear from estranged mothers every single day who are estranged from their children and have been for years upon years upon years and decades upon decades. I know very well that not every estrangement is going to end up in reconciliation. So please don't misconstrue anything that I say in these conversations to think that I think every estrangement can end up in reconciliation, and that if it doesn't, then it's your fault as a parent that you're not doing enough or saying enough or being enough to make that happen. That is not my intent. That is not my belief. What I am going to talk about today especially is what worked for me, and I have seen it work for other estranged parents with their estranged adult children. But it's a long, hard road and process. It's not easy. And it doesn't necessarily mean that if you travel this journey and do these things, that it guarantees a reconciliation. So I just wanted to put that out there. So to begin today's episode, I wanted, this past week, I had a mother in my online support group who also made this aha that I had. And she started connecting the dots, and at first was totally shocked, but is now working on accepting what she's learned, and that is bringing her a bit of peace, inner peace and acceptance, more along the lines of radical acceptance. She's still estranged from her adult children, and she right now doesn't seem to think that they will ever reconcile. But by making this big aha, she is finding her way to radical acceptance in accepting what is here and now, and being able to, by that, find inner peace. So that old saying, and I'm sure you've probably heard it at some point in your life, and perhaps even said it at some point in your life to your own children, that do as I say, not as I do, statement. Again, I know I said it, and I know that I heard it as a child growing up, and I know that I said it to my own children. I believe that is a statement that is in some way coming from the unconscious part of ourselves, saying, please, for the love of God, do not do what I do. I'm telling you a better way. And we want our children to have a better life and find a better path and do it better than us. Yet, our children learn by observing and watching others in action. And by others, I mean us, their parents. I never truly understood this until my adult children estranged from me, and I began to sort through how this, what I'm now calling the perfect storm, became possible. And the more that I sat with myself, the more curious I got, the more therapy I had, the more I began to wonder, how did we get here? How did we even get here? What happened? What made it possible for all of these parts and pieces to come together and end up in estrangement? And what I discovered, that big aha for me was, oh my God, I taught her well. Because my children learned from me what and how to live their life. They learned by watching the things I did and the things I did not do. the things I said and the things I didn't say. They watched what I allowed and what I did not allow. They watched what I encouraged and did not encourage. And all of those things that they were watching were not things that I sat down and said, okay, this is how you do this or don't do that or things like that, and then demonstrated those things for them. That's not it. It was not a schoolroom, a classroom where they sat down and learned these things. They learned every day in everything I said, everything I did, everything I did not say, and everything I did not do. That was how they learned how to be human beings in this world. And what I discovered, to my horror, was that I taught them all of these things on how to estrange. It wasn't my intent. I had no inkling, no desire to teach them that. But they learned that when I did not engage in healthy conflict resolution, but instead just walked away from conflict, that's how you do it. And if I wasn't walking away from conflict, I was actively engaging with anger and rage. And so they grew up knowing how to yell and scream and slam down a phone and walk away. So when I made this revolutionary thought, or when I had this revolutionary thought, I was floored, and I was so filled with shame, I did not know what to do with myself. How could I, as a loving parent, as a parent who loved my children, who protected my children, who did not beat my children, did not want any harm to come to them, how could I bring this harm to them unknowingly? How could I have done this? How did I do this? How did I figure this out? And that's what then led me to my own childhood. How did I learn about conflict resolution to then turn around and teach it to my children, right? And again, when I say teaching, I don't mean actively having these conversations with them. Just by my behaviors, I taught them. By my actions, I taught them. And so when I learned as a child 2 very different ways to handle conflict. One of those ways was anger and rage, and the other one was by shutting up and not saying a word. And letting what I needed or what would be good for me just fall to the wayside. And I learned that from both of my parents. So that's how I handled conflict growing up as a child, and then as an adult, and then as a parent. So my children saw all of this. My children heard all of this. And they figured out, oh, well, this is what mom does, so this must be the way it's done, right? And I had years ago, when my kids were smaller and, older children, but young teens as well. I had an occasion, I was with someone, we were in a mall, and we were walking through. I tell this story often to people, and I oftentimes people they also have the big ahas, right? they are kind of shocked when I tell the story, and then the aha that comes after. And so we're walking through the mall, and we're getting ready to leave, and there's two young moms in front of us with, 4 or 5 really small children. Maybe what you would call stair steps, very young in age. And they were getting ready to leave, and the youngest one, Olive, maybe, 18 months old or so, was just tired, throwing a fit, screaming, kicking, that kind of thing, did not want to leave the mall. And so the mom picked this baby up by his arm and began shouting at him and told him that she was basically going to spank him when she got to the car, but was very loud in saying that. There was nothing calm about what her demeanor at that point in time. She was very frustrated with her child. And the person that I was with looked at me and said, someone ought to take her and hold her up off the ground by her arm, and then, in essence, beat her ass when she gets outside, as she had told her child. And I said to this person I was with, I said, I hear what you're saying. I understand the frustration that you're having, and that it's not right that she do that to that child. But does she really have any other coping mechanisms? Does she know any other way? And this person said to me, well, of course she knows other ways. She's got to watch TV. She sees people walking around this mall. They're not jerking their kids up by their arm and screaming at them. Obviously, she knows a different way. And I said to this person, I said, I don't believe that. I believe that the only way she knows is what is demonstrated to her by her family. So demonstrated to her by her mother, by her grandmother, by her aunts, by her cousins, and her very, very close friends that she spends all of her time with. I said, if you talk about TV, what she's seeing on TV is not her real world, right? Is not her reality. And so her reality is what she sees and experiences within her very close family and people she spends the majority of her time with. That's her reality. What's on TV is not her reality, and that's like some made-up TV show. So no, people don't know. And I share this story because I think that it's important to recognize that even though we think someone, quote, ought to know better, end quote, they don't. Our children don't, quote, know better just because we know better, or we think we know better, and we think we've relayed that to them via words. They know what they see in action every day. And so it's unfair, I think, to expect them to know something different or be something different other than what they've been, what they grew up with, right? It takes immense self-reflection and work and curiosity to think about something other than this vacuumed world that we live in. And that's what I want to talk about in closing here today, in the final moments of this episode, is how the importance of getting curious, the importance of getting outside of the vacuum that is our world, that we immerse ourselves in every day, thinking, oh, this person is reflecting back to me all of my beliefs and my perspective on the world. And so therefore, this, obviously, my perspective of the world has got to be the perspective of the world. And that's not true. That's not true. Our perspective is just that. It's ours. It may not be anyone else's. And even if it is someone else's, it doesn't mean that it's everyone's. And so when I got myself into therapy and was able to have a lot of my hurts and pains and sadness and despair witnessed by my therapist, and then validated for having those feelings and emotions, then I was able to start getting curious about, how are my kids seeing this? What if I were to look through their eyes? What might they be seeing? What might they be thinking if I could get in their head? And while it was a struggle in the beginning for me to think, how on earth could they think that any part of this is okay, right? Because that was my perspective. That was my thought, because this was quote unquote being done to me. When I was able to get out of my own head and into perhaps their world and how they were seeing things, how they were experiencing things, then I started having that, oh my gosh, they saw this, they heard that, they witnessed this, I was this way when they were growing up, I wasn't that way when they were growing up. And so I began to see how this perfect storm started coming together. When they saw me just cutting people off because I didn't agree with them, or they didn't have the same belief that I had. That's how I taught them conflict resolution. So why would anything be different now? Because their world, again, going back to that story in the mall, their world, their reality is what they lived growing up. And so that was this massive, oh my God, I taught them how to do this. And again, I'm not saying that we as estranged parents, have asked for this or deserve this or any of that. I am simply coming from this space of, let's try to come back out and look at it, the bigger picture, instead of zeroing in on just our experience and our little part in the grand scheme of this estrangement world. There are bigger pieces to this, and when we can zoom out, and begin to see the bigger picture, we can have a better understanding. And understanding is different than acceptance or different than agreeing, right? And understanding of why someone is doing the things that they're doing. And when we can do that, that's how we end up disengaging from the assault on our children. And I see that often. And I did it. I did it when I was in the middle of my estrangement. I thought, I called my children everything but what they were. And I just thought they were just being these horrific, mean, horrible human beings on the face of the planet because I was experiencing so much pain that I was just really, I had just a negative attitude towards them and about them. And when I was able to get to this place of curiosity and begin to want to look at the estrangement experience through their eyes, through their lens, that's when my harshness and my judgment of them began to relax and then soften and then dissipated. And that is then what I think allowed reconciliation to happen. Because I don't know about you, but if I know that somebody is out saying things about me that are rude and cruel and nasty, I don't want to have anything to do with them. And while maybe your children, you're not actually saying that to your children, because I never did. I never said those things to them. But I talked about them to other people. And who knows what other people go back and tell our children. Right? Or we've written something in a text, in an email, online, that eventually makes its way back to our children. And I just I know that I would not want to have anything to do with anyone who talked bad about me. And so, and again, I understand when you're in the middle of, and especially at the beginning of an estrangement experience, it's really hard to get beyond wanting to just, like I said, call them everything but what they are, right? And so I understand that, but I would like for you to consider, if you're able, or when you're able, consider developing a sense of curiosity about what they are experiencing, what they did experience, and not necessarily surrounding the estrangement, but just their childhood and how they learned about conflict. What did they learn? What did they see? What did they witness about conflict? Either with them and you as parent-child, or with you and your spouse, or with you and your friends, or with you and coworkers, you and the neighbors. What did your children learn? And begin to, and maybe it wasn't necessarily you, maybe it was your spouse that, taught these things, and they observed and spent more time with them, or what have you. But that's how we learn. And then to get curious about how you learned. What did you learn in your childhood that taught you about conflict resolution and how to do it, how not to do it, those kinds of things. I am writing my own memoir, and the title of it is I Taught Her Well. And I can see all of this now. I could not see it when I was in the middle of the acute phase of my estrangement experience. And again, I see parents, mothers specifically, because I work with estranged moms, and helping them to work through their estrangement experience. I see them making this same aha. And that is when I generally begin to see the softening of the hearts, and a more willingness to either reconcile, and begin to, I don't like to say give in, but accept some of the conditions that their children place, and boundaries they place regarding a potential reconciliation. And then eventually that leads into reconciliation. So, and if it doesn't, then it does lead to, as I mentioned earlier in this episode, about the mom who has come to a place of radical acceptance and having more inner peace because she has made this aha and has started connecting those dots and having a clearer understanding of why her children are doing what they're doing, how they're doing it, why they're doing it the specific way that they're doing it. So that, I kind of feel like maybe today's episode was kind of all over the board, all over the map, so to speak, but I hope it makes some sort of sense to you, that you're able to suss out, little nuggets here and there that might be helpful for you. And if you have any questions about what I've covered today, feel free to email me. I'm happy to have a conversation with you, and that can be via Zoom, it can be via email, or a phone call. I'm happy to do that. And my email address is theestrangedheart@gmail.com. Again, theestrangedheart@gmail.com. And again, I'm not passing any judgments. I'm not saying that if you don't do this and you don't make this aha, then reconciliation will never happen for you. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is it's a gift to us as well as our children to be able to take the negative charge out, to release some of the anger, to soften a little bit, and to have more inner peace. and this is one way that worked for me, and I hope that you can see that for what it is worth. So this brings episode number 6 to a close. I want to thank you for listening today and for hanging out. And again, I hope you have some takeaway nuggets that can help you on your journey, wherever you may be on the estrangement and or reconciliation path. If you feel that you've gotten something positive from this podcast, I would ask that you share it. One of the things that I've learned through the estrangement experience is that oftentimes people are estranged and we don't know it. So by sharing it, you can provide some hope and some information to people who might not otherwise have access to that. And again, if you are an estranged adult parent or an estranged adult child and would like to share your story on our podcast, please feel free to reach out to me at theestrangedheart@gmail.com. And you do not have to appear as a guest on the show. I know that a lot of estranged parents and estranged adult children want to tell me about their stories, but they don't want to be on the show. And I'm happy to listen to your story and to share that anonymously through my talking on the podcast. I can share your story and not reveal identifying information if you so choose. But I do think that it's important to share our stories. It's beneficial for us. It helps to relieve some of the pressure when we can actually speak our stories to someone who can listen and not be judgmental or shaming in that. And it helps others to hear about our stories so that they know that they're not alone in this estrangement world, and that for some it might provide hope. So feel free to reach out to me. I welcome any inquiries regarding that. So I think that is going to bring today's episode to a close. As we get into the holiday season here, I also just want to say real quick that I'm thinking of you. I'm holding you close in my heart. I know that this is a really, really, really tough time of year, and I'm holding you close. Take care.